Good afternoon, everyone. Thanks so much for coming to this panel. We're going to jump right in. This is the panel from Lead Generation to Student Retention, the increasingly mission-critical role of marketing in student success. I'm Jason Palmer. I'll be your host for this hour-long or 50-minute-long program. And we've got here 4 leaders who are very steeped in the evolving role of marketing in higher ed. Before I jump in, I'm just get a show of hands from the audience. How many of you work in higher education, either at a university or in an organization that works with a higher education institution? Okay, so pretty much everybody in the room. How many of you are in higher education marketing specifically? Okay, and how many of you work with marketing and never have quite fully understood it, but work with marketing on a regular basis? Okay, so that's kind of what we thought we would get in the audience here. My background is about 20 years in education technology, mostly as an investor. I'm at New Markets Venture Partners now, which is a Lumina Foundation-backed VC. And I spent the last 3 years at the Gates Foundation leading the higher education innovation practice. So Gates works with about 300 institutions, and over those 20 years, especially in the last 3 years, there's a big change in the way marketing is perceived in higher education. It's no longer just recruiting, it's no longer just branding, it's the role that marketing can play in student success. And so I'm gonna let each of you kind of go down the line here, but I'd like you to talk about your institution, the students it serves, more and more adult students, the type of education it offers, is it online, blended, and how you've seen the evolution at your institution in terms of the role of marketing in student success beyond the traditional domain that marketing has played. Why don't we start here with Bill and we'll go right down the line.
Good afternoon, everybody. I work at Penn State. Penn State's a pretty big place. We're a traditional R1 university, public. About 100,000 students. We have about 48,000 at University Park, which is our main campus located in central Pennsylvania. And then we have roughly about 32,000 students that are spread across 20 regional campuses, as well as a law school, a medical school, and a technical university, all in Pennsylvania. We also have about 20,000 students in the World Campus, which is our online learning that serves adults. That's where I spend the majority of my time. Things have changed, I think, quite a bit in just the 11 years that I've been at Penn State. I was invited in 2006 to come to Penn State and lecture a graduate school class on marketing, and 11 years later, they haven't gotten rid of me yet. So in the time that I've been there, this was something that was relatively small, just a couple thousand students in a world where we were kind of one of very few traditional institutions in a market that was very heavily dominated at that time by the for-profit institutions. Obviously, that dynamic has changed very much. I think the most recent research we conducted indicated that we had close to 400 like competitors in the marketplace now. The role that marketing plays in the World Campus in terms of student retention is, we believe pretty firmly, that marketing doesn't stop once the prospective student becomes a student. We've spent thousands of dollars to attract students to our institutions. It's a worthwhile investment to continue to work with that student and make sure that we're reinforcing constantly the reasons why they came to the institution and what the potential benefit for them will be if they're able to succeed.
That's good. All right, Carol, how about at your institution?
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm from Harvard University, specifically the Division of Continuing Education, which is an umbrella organization that houses a number of lifelong learning brands. The biggest is Harvard Extension School, which serves 14,000 students on an annual basis, and those are primarily part-time working adults, similar to what Bill was referring to. And we have a very unique admissions path for our degree programs, which is that students take courses first. They have a number of pre-admission courses, and if they prove that they can do the work, then they are automatically admitted to the degree program. So another way that we're a bit unique is that we have a pretty extensive course taker population that we have worked to build new product offerings to retain them for more than just a single course. We're primarily credit bearing, so we do have on-campus and online courses and online certificates, but all of our degree programs have a residency requirement. And the way that marketing has changed and evolved for us in the last 5 to 10 years is that it's really become much more about marketing. And so in my role as strategic growth initiatives, I don't just oversee marketing, but also new program development and partnerships so that we make sure that we're developing new offerings that match what the market wants. And I also oversee enrollment and retention. Since we have spent money to attract these students, we want to keep them, and that's particularly challenging in the adult part-time learner space with people stopping and starting on a frequent basis. And then similar to what Bill was referring to, I also have alumni relations so that we're able to keep remarketing to folks as they continue out through the path of their careers and need to come back and retool.
That's great. And Jeff?
Hi, I'm Jeff Tognola. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer for Walden University. Just a little bit about my role as a Chief Marketing Officer. I'm responsible for a variety of different functional areas between product and brand marketing, media analytics, media buying, creative services, customer relationship management, alumni relations as well, and event management. What we've brought is a lot of the disciplines of marketing together to bring a center of excellence around how we work with not only just prospects, but also students and alumni as they're kind of entering our experience. With regards to Walden, it's an online predominantly institution. It's global, US accredited. Just to give you a sense, we have about 52,000 students. About 56 of them are minority, 79% of them are females. We are mainly focused on the working professionals as well. And with regards to our top programs, one of the questions, Jason, you had asked us to cover as well was with regards to all the different types of program offerings that we have. Our top 4 programs, Master's in Nursing, Master's of Social Work, Doctor of Business Administration, and also a Master's in Education. So those are our top 4 programs, but we also serve many other programs as well.
And Lauren?
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Lauren Burns. I'm the Senior Vice President of Marketing for Colorado State University Global Campus. CSU Global Campus is a little bit unique. I would say we're most closely compared to Penn State, but we're very different in the fact that we are independent from CSU, which is our land-grant institution in the system. We don't take any state funding either, so that makes us a little bit unique in our offerings. Our mission is primarily bachelor's degree completion, so all of, quote, most of our undergraduate students come in with at least 12 credits, the average of them coming in with 54. So we're really in the business of degree completion. We are regionally accredited. Our accreditation is independent to us. So we have a little bit different model than some of the other institutions. Personally, I've been with Global since 2009. We were founded in late 2008. We've grown to almost 18,000 students and 10,000 graduates in that time.
So just a quick show of hands on the panel. Which of you serve more than 80% of your students predominantly online? Okay, so all 4. So obviously that's a major trend that's been happening over the last 10 years. If you go back to 2007, the leading online providers were University of Phoenix, Kaplan, et cetera. Now we've got multiple public institutions or quasi-public institutions that are actually some of the leading online educators serving adult students. I also spent 5 years at Kaplan before, which I know is big in the news these days. This was back in the 2007 to 11 timeframe. But marketing back then at Kaplan was all focused on metrics. It was very metrics driven. How much money did it take to attract a new student to the university? What % of students made it through that first semester to the second semester? Talk to me a little bit about whether those are metrics that you all track or how metrics have evolved over time, and what are the key metrics on the public side of the equation? I'll start with you, Jeff.
Sure. So much like any classical marketing organization, we're very focused on a lot of those traditional marketing metrics, but with regards to progress, one of the most important things that we've established is strong relationships between the marketing department and obviously the student side of the business. So one of the things that we did before we kind of delved into developing a lot of our metrics was to identify all the different stages within the experience. As I mentioned earlier, we've got 3 major stages between prospect, student, and alumni, but inside each of those stages, we have a lot of different sub-funnel stages. So what we've identified as from a metrics perspective, which really unites all of the marketing functions, but also on the student side as well, is progress. It's what can we do as an organization to deliver the best end-to-end experience, and as we look at individuals as they're progressing through the funnel, we're ultimately, our main goal is to minimize drop-off. A couple other areas that we focus heavily on is what we call as a term census retention. It's at a point when a prospect has accepted our offer as mission, and they consider themselves what we call reserve. They're ready to reserve for a particular start. And sometimes it could be 2 weeks before the start, it could be 3 months before the start. And one of the ways that we've united is how we focus on minimizing the drop-off rate, or obviously the amount of retention that we can have. And that's a way that we've, again, united the marketing teams with the student-facing organizations as well. And then the last one that we really heavily focus on is term-to-term retention. So thinking about all of the stages in the funnel, and then obviously some of those other critical stages, census retention, and also term-to-term retention.
Lauren, you were nodding your head. Is that similar to how you measure it and think about it?
Yes, very similar. So we look at first to third term retention for new students, which we're doing a pretty good job at 85%. And then we look at trimester over trimester. But in speaking specifically about marketing metrics and how vital they are in the entire student life cycle, there was a period where we took a step back and literally I oversaw enrollment, student advising, and marketing all at the same time to make sure that those messages are cohesive. Because what message you're delivering to your student in order to recruit them to being a student, if you're not fulfilling that brand promise all the way through the student life cycle, you're not going to retain them. The second point that I think you started to touch on that's really interesting is as all of our advertising has gone more and more digital and attribution is at a full 100%, you know exactly where that student comes from. And so even at Global, we look at it from the academic performance side of if we have a certain advertising source where those students are coming in and maybe their costs are lower, but they're not retaining or they're not able to be successfully academic, they're dropping out, they're failing courses, whatever that looks like, that comes back to the marketing team. We're looking at that data every month to understand where those lead sources are and then how those students are performing academically, because at the end of the day, they're not graduating. It doesn't matter what that marketing process was, it's not students we can serve.
Now, Carol, going to you, so you actually oversee marketing and other functions. So talk to me a little bit about the student experience. Like that was something that came up on our pre-call and that you all have been thinking about. What are things you're doing that go beyond marketing through that student experience for those multiple semesters?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we really, similar to Lauren and Jeff, we're looking at term-to-term retention and have been able to increase our retention rates 8% over the last 5 years between term 1 and term 2. So it's about 1,000 students more we're able to retain. And we've been able to do that through a number of different ways, one of which I alluded to is our product development. So we introduced in the past 5 years a suite of nearly 40 graduate professional certificates. And so students take 4 courses and earn a certificate, many of which can be earned entirely online. Those certificates can stack toward a degree. And so I think one of the things that has helped us move the needle on that is just, rather than, they see an interim credential that is attainable in just a few semesters as opposed to the, kind of daunting task of earning a master's degree or a bachelor's degree. So that's one area. We also have been working with a couple of partners that I think some some other panelists are working with as well. The first is Inside Track, who helps us with enrollment coaching, and we're specifically using them in the early stages of the relationship. So to get them, help get students enrolled and off to a good start, to check back in with them towards the end of their first course and help get them re-enrolled in the second course. And so that has been successful. We're also doing a little bit of piloting with a relatively new company called MODERATOR, which does retention-based social media marketing messages to students who have opted in, which by and large a lot of students opt in. So in their personal social media feeds, they'll see retention-based messages, some of which are branded, some of which are just general good reinforcements of the value of earning a degree and helping remind them of their long-term goals. So I think all of those things have really contributed to moving the needle on student retention. And one quick thing that I want to add is around the faculty side. So it's not just about marketing, but the academic side is really looking at their courses and looking at course evaluations, looking at grade scale distribution, and trying to intervene a little bit earlier as faculty work to convert their classroom-based courses to online courses, and how do you do that effectively from a technology standpoint.
As you were describing that, I was thinking about how marketing used to be a fuzzy science. You couldn't tell which of your marketing vehicles were generating your results, but now in this world of digital marketing, each of you, it's all about metrics, like numbers, numbers, numbers just came out of all three of you. Bill, have you talked a little bit about the 11 years at Penn State? Have you seen the data-driven side of things? Was it important at the beginning, or is this something that's just gotten more and more important and now is omnipresent?
I think it's a little bit of both. From the more important side, I think being a traditional university, we have all the benefits of this very large economic engine, which is Penn State. We also deal with a few of the challenges. Some of those are legacy systems that have been in place for a long time and don't necessarily provide the easy feeds of data and information that we would need to necessarily make all the types of data-driven decisions that we've made, but we've been able over the course of the years to pull a lot of these systems together, and at the same time, a lot of these systems have been upgraded as well. Where I see it shifting for us is when I first came to Penn State, the majority of the expenditure that we were investing to attract students was really coming from what I would call program-oriented, very, very specific feature benefit-oriented advertising. And then we did some studies, and I mean, Penn State's a pretty well-known brand. I mean, our brand awareness definitely starts to decay as you get farther and farther away from the East Coast and the Mid-Atlantic, but still a reasonably well-known brand. But we found out there were a lot of people who knew about Penn State but didn't necessarily know about World Campus. So we started to shift and invest a greater portion of our budget in branding to really sort of help get that word out there. The challenge when you move to branding is the fact that it's much more difficult to attribute a brand spend to a particular enrollment. So I think we've made some progress in some areas in terms of our ability with digital to measure our program-related advertising. We can certainly do it with some of our brand-related advertising, but in some cases that can be pretty tricky to attribute.
So even though you're quasi independent, you're still using the systems of Penn State,
yes.
the core campus.
Yeah, we're pretty tightly aligned with the university. We actually, our academic partners are the ones that maintain academic authority over our programs. So the essence is if someone earns a Penn State World Campus degree, they're earning a Penn State degree. Our degree is not distinguished from a degree that a student would earn if they were to come to University Park and spend 4 years or more as a student. So to that end, it's a real benefit. But the the downside of all those ties is you're working within the system that was primarily designed years ago for traditional age students.
Interesting. I have an ignorant question. I probably should have asked you on the prep call, but is Penn State World Campus, is it actually the descendant of the extension school at Penn State, or is it a different, what's its origin?
The origin is distance education, and somebody, when I get back, will yell at me because I won't remember how long ago we started this, but Penn State sort of being located in the geographic center of Pennsylvania, meaning we're equally inaccessible to everybody. You know, you're far away from Pittsburgh, you're very far away from Philadelphia and other major population centers. And then with our sort of grounding in the ag business, we've sort of been in the distance education business for a very, very long time. So even though the delivery mechanism is quite different, I think you could say the general philosophy has been in place for a long time.
Lauren, and Colorado often gets compared to Penn State, but you describe yourself as more independent. So talk to me a little bit about that. What's the origin and the descendancy of your organization?
Sure. So we have the Colorado State University system, and then we have 3 campuses that are all independent. So we have CSU down in Pueblo, which is a Hispanic designated serving institute, CSU Global Campus, which is actually operated out of Denver, and then our land grant institution, CSU in Fort Collins Research School, very typical, university. We had a group of very brilliant people, one of which is in the room, who, in about 2007 really started thinking about how are we going to serve the adults that don't degree complete at our regular land grant institution. We know the amount of Americans who have some college and no degree is large and seems to be growing every year. We know that right now the media is telling us the ROI of a college degree is going down. And so, they really wanted to take a unique perspective in how we serve those learners. Yes, predominantly in the beginning to serve Coloradans, but now we're about 50% Colorado, 50% outside of Colorado. And so, we just decided to do something really different. So we took a $12 million loan from the CSU System Board of Governors and put together an online campus. And our first class in September of 2008 had 200 students. And we've built to 18,000 from there. So fundamentally, we were created to be online. So our systems are completely separate. Our faculty are separate. All of those things are very different because of who we were built to serve, and the mode in which we were going to serve them has always been online, and it's always been adult learners.
Great. So I'm going to take maybe a 90-degree turn here to talk about retention for a second and maybe push on a couple of the things that you all have said. So it may not be related to budget, but whichever way your institution thinks about it, how do you think about the amount of resources you dedicate to recruiting new students versus retaining the students you've already got? How does your institution, how do you work through that calculus? Is it budget allocation, 80% for new students, 20% for once they've already been there? Is it metrics that people are gold on? How does it work? This is kind of open to any of you to jump in, and how does your institution logic through that?
I can jump on it. The answer is I don't know if I have an exact split for you in terms of revenue, but I can tell you that we've definitely started to move a higher percentage of not only our external spend, but also our internal resources toward 2 areas. I think number 1 is doing a better job of converting a prospect. We've seen an area, interestingly, fairly what you would think would be far down in the funnel, where you get the student to accept your offer. And then when we look at the number of students that accept the offer versus the ones who actually enroll,
Big drop.
not as good as we think it could be. So, that has spurred us to start to look at, what other types of interactions do we need to have with that student? Are we creating a little too much dead air in between those 2 milestones? And, in essence, are we maybe taking some of the air out of the balloon that we've worked so hard to try to build with the student? So that's been a problem. The other issue has been that marketing expenses are continuing to increase. We've traditionally, I think, been below the industry average, at least from what I've been able to tell. But digital, forget how many people I saw in this room, but a lot of you in this room are probably either buying digital or selling it. And in that case, you're all benefiting, you're making my price go up. So, from that end, having to continue to just bring reams and reams of students to the front door, whereas if we're able to, improve our conversion rates, that means there's less students than we actually have to recruit. The other area is really retention. We know that, if we look at the 4-year lifespan of a student, and granted, adults sometimes take longer than that, but of the audience that we lose 81% of them between year 1 and year 2. So sometime between year 1 and up to when year 2 starts, we're losing most of the students we're losing, that's where we lose the most of them.
Right.
So we know if we're able to focus efforts there and do more to keep those students engaged and get them over that hump, the retention rates at that point really drop off pretty dramatically.
How about the rest of you? How do your organizations think about it?
Yeah, I would say with regards to Walden, one of the things that I've seen over the years, I've been there about 6 years, is, if you go back many years, and many industries, many different companies, it was clearly defined, acquisition and then retention.
Right.
And what I've seen over the years since joining the company is there's a nice blend, right? There aren't silos within the organization, and one of the reasons that occurred was we united the marketing teams along with the student side of the house to develop what we call a universal end-to-end customer experience. The reason we did that is because we wanted to identify the mindset of these prospects, these students, as they were progressing through the enrollment or the student experience, the sales funnel. And my belief is the technology that the marketing teams were using could be well leveraged by those on the student side. And oftentimes the content that was being produced for marketing purposes in today's day and age, a lot of the content is being produced by our faculty. They're writing very excellent articles that are very relevant. Just to give you an example, if someone was searching on, the difference between psychiatrist and psychologist, we'll have a professional write an article to speak specific to that question. So that might be driven by the marketing team to help us rank organically, to be leveraged within our nurturing process, to help minimize the drop-off between, that period you were talking about, Bill. But the other important thing is that some of these anxieties that surface, throughout the enrollment process resurface again, right? As students are in the student experience, life hits them. They've got a lot of things that they have to, deal with, be it personally, professionally. What we're seeing is that, leveraging the technology and the things that the marketing team is working on can be leveraged on the student side. So we've established a group that focuses on first-year student retention, and that is something that when I was at AT&T, I kind of share this as kind of a side note. We created this nesting program. It was to bridge someone from new acquisition to retention. It was basically a period of time where we thought they were most vulnerable. And we did the same thing. We identified a period of time where we felt like the drop-off, to your point, Bill, was higher than others, to pilot ways to improve the retention rate. And a lot of, again, the technologies that we're using in the sales CRM, the marketing automation area have been very beneficial to taking what you classified as a budget and kind of smoothing it out so it's not clearly defined as an acquisition budget or a retention budget. It's really part of the whole experience.
I think that you're hitting a really good point, and that's if your student is struggling at somewhere in their process, whether it's between year 1 or year 2, or if you're working with adult learners, they have another child or they get a promotion at work and something's happening in their life where they're struggling. I think if your university isn't marketing the product that they need, whether it's a student service or whether it's a policy that's beneficial to them, somebody else is. Particularly with the amount of competitors now, how smart we can be with our targeting and our digital advertising. If you have a student who you're not nesting, I might. And I'm a transfer institution, so I'll be happy to take them. So I think that's something that's really important. I'll give you my card. I think it's something that's really important. And as we're talking about marketing through the student life cycle, if your marketing team isn't marketing to your students and catering those messages and those points to them and always reminding them why they picked you, someone else is just going to come and scoop them right up and make it very easy oftentimes for the student to transfer institutions.
So this might be kind of a dumb question then, but do all of you have dedicated teams who focus on students post-enrollment?
We don't.
No.
No.
So
One big happy marketing team for everybody.
For everybody. So it's the whole pipeline from initial lead gen all the way through literally graduation
And alumni.
and alumni.
Yep.
Is that how you all think of it? No,
We're
to a
a
degree?
we're a little bit different in the sense that we have a team that's dedicated towards marketing, and then we have actually a split approach to enrollment and retention where we have some in-house folks, and then we have Inside Track as an external partner that's been helping us. And the more that we've worked with some of the external partners, to what Bill was talking about is that internally we have all of these legacy systems. It's very hard to get the data out, but when you are working with other partners, you see the benefit of having that data. And not just within the marketing group, but I would say on the academic side where you've had people who perhaps have seen retention as their purview, that they are responsible for graduation rates and that can't possibly be outsourced in any way. Once they get their hands on the data and can see, wow, okay, we can change these things, then they're much more open to working with outside vendors. And I think for us, that's going to be the route that we focus on because until our systems can catch up to deliver the kind of data that our external partners can give us.
One of the
only
things,
other thing
yeah,
I
go
would
for it,
just
yeah.
to clarify to make sure, so the student side of Walden reports into our Chief Student Experience Officer, and while they're on paper separate organizations, a lot of the ways the team operate is if they are one unit, and it really comes back to just aligned objectives, just to make sure that we're uniting around the customer and the progress. As your point you were making, Lauren, the success is not just to get them in the door. Success is to show that we're bringing the right students in the door, we're enrolling them in the right programs, we're supporting them well through the experience, and that the product that they're engaging with, the actual student classroom, is delivering an expectation that's beyond what we set up during the marketing, early stages, that we're delivering in excess of that expectation. So.
One of the things that's striking me from a number of your responses is that now at the Gates Foundation, many of the colleges we work with were community colleges, and marketing in those organizations often is kind of thought of as an operational function, whereas you all are talking about it as though it's much more of a strategic function. You, Carol, were talking about actually inventing new programs out of what is special initiatives, but fundamentally product marketing. What caused that? What's the trigger for an institution to think of marketing as a strategic function? Even start dates, like many schools are still on a semester start date paradigm, whereas I suspect many of you are on a monthly or more often paradigm than 3 semesters a year. So what causes an institution to start to see marketing as strategic?
I think we're still working on it. I've been there 11 years, and I think that the journey had already begun with online learning, and I've seen a really, really big shift, I think, in terms of not only how our operational partners think of us, but also our academic partners, which, frankly, can sometimes be a real challenging bunch. And, rightly so. I mean, they ask a lot of questions. It's their programs. There's a lot of trust that's needed there. And, frankly, I think in our case, it's really just taken time to sort of show results. You end up with a couple early adopters that are willing to work with you. You create a success story, and even though our academic colleges act somewhat independently, boy, if one of them has a success story, you can better believe the rest of them are going to know about it pretty quickly. So for us, it's just been an issue of time, perseverance, and success.
Let's go a little deeper on that. How many folks here are on the academic side of the house at a higher education institution? A couple? Now, it doesn't mean we don't have a huge audience out there on the live stream that might be on the academic side, but a lot of increasing marketing's strategic value is working with those academics. And so, Lauren, I saw you kind of nodding your head to some of what Bill was saying, but what are some of the tips and tricks you would share with folks on how to make sure that marketing is bought into by the academic side of the house and actually really maybe listens to them in a different way or leverages them? What is it? What's the secret?
Well, my personal opinion is, and I realize this is going to be a little bit unpopular, and I'm okay with that. If you're not thinking of your degree programs and your certificate programs as products, you're at a disadvantage. And I think for us, really bringing our faculty and our program coordinators into the fold and having those conversations with them and having them help build the content and understand, well, what makes your accounting program different? Well, because we prepare people for the CPA.
All programs do
Whoop-de-doo.
that. Yeah.
Everybody does that, hopefully, or else you've got a problem with your accounting program. So really helping them to understand and come into the fold about what really truly differentiates your product. Why is my accounting program going to be any different than Bill's? And how do I make sure that that makes sense to students? So really having them understand that from the student or the consumer's mindset of why they should pick yours, when especially now they can take mine, they can take Bill's, they can take one at ASU online. What makes ours different? What makes ours better to fit into them? And the best people to answer that question are the faculty who are in those courses and having those interactions with those students, because they're hearing it directly from the consumer.
Well, this might be a little unfair to turn to you next, Carol, but you're Harvard.
Yeah.
Everybody wants to go to Harvard, right? So why don't you have
Exactly.
millions of students? Do you have that same challenge?
Well, and I was going to say from an organization standpoint, the idea that marketing needs a strategic place at the table is not one that is shared at the university level. But I think that we're going to make inroads in having marketing at the strategy table in the units like ours that are about online education and part-time students, where by necessity, marketing really needs to play a strategic role. When I look at counterparts around the broader university, there are very few people who are doing true marketing. It's really more communications-oriented work. They don't understand exactly what SEO is and how you drive enrollment with that. It is a challenge, because I think, yes, of course, the Harvard brand brings all sorts of good things. It's also a little bit of a double-edged sword for us in serving the part-time learner, who probably, many of which are intimidated by the brand and opt not to even attempt to enroll.
Good. Well, I'm going to do this panel a little bit different than the other panels here that don't have Q&A, and offer a chance to anyone in the audience who wants to ask a question of the panel to raise your hand, and then I will repeat your question. Otherwise, I have other questions of my own, but I'm going to give, there we go. Go for it. Shout it out. Stand up and shout it out.
All right, so we're talking about marketing. We talked about it in sort of abstract way, but it's really about content, the messages you're delivering, the narratives you're painting. How do you make sure that the dream you're presenting is not a fantasy?
So, all right, the question, I'm repeating this for the live stream audience, is how do you make sure that the marketing message isn't overselling or isn't painting a dreamy picture that doesn't match the X% retention after the first year that actually comes to pass?
I can take it. It's a good question. I think that's what the name of our panel is. We kind of skimmed over it a little bit, but if the marketing messaging that you're presenting to your potential students is your promise, right? It's your brand promise. I'm telling you that you're going to graduate. I'm going to tell you that there's going to be supportive faculty there to help you, and student services, and whatever that means. And so I think marketing being truly integrated with all of those service components in your organization, and not only they hold us accountable, right? We need students. We hold them accountable to, hey, I'm telling our potential students that you're going to respond to them within 24 hours. So you bet I'm sitting at that table asking about our response time. So I think it's part of that strategic, making the role strategic within the university, is actually sitting down and integrating into the full student life cycle to make sure that your brand promise is being met throughout every step of the phase, and then into alumni, because then that's how you get referrals.
The one thing I would add on to that is, one of the things that we've identified is, and it goes back to being a strategic partner with the academic side. You know, one of the big successes that I would say relative to that is full transparency with that organization. You know, I think it's coming into a relationship being highly collaborative. And also a lot of humility, right? You know, when you have marketers, you know, arrogant marketers thinking they know best and, you know, using a lot of technical jargon, and then you have the academic side, it's easy to get confused. And the reality is that the marketers need the academic side. It's the product, it's the experience. And one of the things that we've been starting to do is to try to pull the essence of what the experience is like further upstream. By doing that, it's really working much closer with our faculty and understanding a lot more about their personal why, about what it is that they're doing, the blogs that they're posting, the content they're generating, not necessarily associated with the institution, but just as it relates to what their mission is and what it is that they're looking to do, and really bringing that experience up further up into the experience, the enrollment process as well. I think another thing is just that natural check that you want to have in the process, which is that constant understanding of if people are staying or if they step out of the institution, what's the reason behind that? If we're not listening to what the customers are saying, if we're finding the product experience has too much friction, if we're finding that faculty are not as engaged as we expect them to be, we need to take that information and not file it away. Our job is to take that insight and then sit down with the academic side, our product managers, and really come up with ways to ensure that the experience is delivering on that brand promise.
And do each of you all survey the students that drop out to find out why they dropped out and what and then go back and try to fix whatever was in the process that might have caused that? Is there, you're all nodding your heads, but maybe you have an example there, Bill?
Well, we do. I will say that it sounds great to survey students that have dropped out. Getting students to respond to a survey that have either dropped out or graduated is really, really tough to do. But we do, and we know that there is a significant portion of dropouts, or in some case what we call stopouts, which for adult learners, it's not unusual for somebody for life to get away for a semester or two, or sometimes even longer, so they disappear and then they re-enroll. But the reasons that we see will be either difficulty with the learning, with the technology, or just a feeling that maybe the degree is no longer of significant value for what they want to accomplish. And you see other reasons as well. Sometimes it's relationships that they formed that maybe haven't been as productive as maybe they thought they were going to be with faculty or with their advisors. But in most cases with adults, life gets in the way.
So pushing on that a little bit further, what innovations have you all seen that are kind of marketing driven that help improve student success? Carol, you mentioned a couple earlier. Are there others on the panel that have seen innovations that improve student success that are marketing driven, either marketing implemented or you all help bring it to the institution, to a different part of the organization?
I'll touch on, I'm going to kind of couple something that I mentioned earlier, but also comment on something Bill mentioned about that one stage in our experience where people they accept our offer and our mission, but they may not make it all the way to that enrollment period, that what we call that reserve to census period. There was a lot of confusion about why. Like, what was the reason we were seeing drop off, like every other institution. They've made it that far through the enrollment process, they're ready to go, and they just don't make it into the classroom. And so we did survey. We actually had, 100 conversations that lasted between 10 and 20 minutes long. I listened to all of them, along with the academic side and a lot of my functional area experts, to understand what were the reasons. And some of them were life getting in the way. I got deployed, right? I mean, what are you going to do in a situation like that? But there were other things that we were able to pick up on. And following that information, we went into kind of what we called a think tank with our lab, our innovation team. We have an innovation team at the institution, technology-led, to identify ways to overcome some of these barriers. And there's a new innovation that they launched called a digital coach. And this is a way of taking all of the things that we have seen that have prepared new prospects to be successful through that onboarding process. And we package them up into kind of you can call it a nudge engine or a digital experience to deliver them information in a manner that they have opted to say, yes, this is how I like to receive it. And it might be connecting with our social community, reaching out to your faculty, getting into the classroom. Obviously, some of the tactical things like filling out your financial aid and all those other things. But it was an important part to kind of bring that insight from the research further up into the experience, and then working with our innovation team and putting something together that we can truly deploy and then measure its success. And it's only going to be successful if it produces, successful outcomes. Right. Yeah.
I'll open it up. How about, I saw you in the back first, in the middle.
Hi there. At most of the residential colleges, they have student ambassadors, which they use to one extent or another, both in recruiting and retention. How does that pan out in the online environment?
Student ambassadors in the online environment. How does that pan out? Are you trying anything? Is it a good idea still yet to be implemented, or is it started?
I think with adult learners, it's sort of give or take. You have those populations of adult learners who they don't want to talk to anybody. They want to come in, they want to do their work, and then they want to graduate, and that's it. They have enough other people to talk to and report to during the day. And then you have the other side of the population that does look for those resources. So we do a couple of things like a mentor program with our alumni, which we've actually seen in the past 2 years an uptick of people who are interested in participating in those programs before sort of give or take, and now we've seen more and more people who want to participate. The other thing that we have is an advocates program where it might be, it's student to student, it might be whether it's somebody has a question that they really want the student perspective of on our Facebook page, and they don't want me marketing giving them my jargon, they actually want the student experience. So we have a group of students, faculty, and staff who can all then relate to students just on that one-off level. And we've also seen a large increase in the amount of people who are asking for that more genuine, real interaction versus just a canned marketing message.
We have about, just to elaborate on, we also have about 1,200 what we call ambassadors. They're US-based, and they enroll in the program. It's an ambassador program, and they kind of sign up to continue to kind of carry the message of the institution, but in addition, carry the mission of what it is that they're looking to do with the degree that they earned. Some of the things that we are trying new is to establish chapters as well, local physical chapters, because a lot of them have gone to info sessions, in their local area where we might have a number of prospects that expressed an interest in Atlanta or in an area where we have a large concentration. And to your point, Lauren, they want to hear from an ambassador, right? So we have ambassadors in our social community that are fielding questions, not only of students, but also prospects as well. But the new chapter thing is something new for us. We're doing it in a couple of cities and seeing great success because they do want that physical presence, even though a lot of them are engaging digitally as well.
Because we have a fairly well-established alumni network around the country, our alumni have been fantastic in helping to support our World Campus students. And we have done some alumni mentoring programs. I will say that one of the challenges that you do see is frequently you end up with more willing alumni than you may students with adult
Because
students.
many of the students want to just power through. And,
Right.
Yeah.
But the thing that they really seem to like to get involved with is the alumni events that are taking place. I mean, our World Campus graduates are joining our alumni association at almost twice the rate of our traditional students. So they're definitely looking for this connection. You get them involved with the local events. The alumni associations have quote-unquote student send-offs. So if a student in Los Angeles is going to be coming to University Park, they kind of have a big thing for them. They're doing it for the World Campus students as well, even though the World Campus students physically aren't really going anywhere.
I think these are the kind of things that you enable and are able to be more successful if you bring the marketing and enrollment functions much closer to the alumni. So the fact that many of us have alumni as part of our organization along with marketing and enrollment, I think really opens up the door where before it wasn't that it was impossible, it was just that alumni lived over in that other organization. It wasn't sitting right next to you talking to you. So that's important.
Okay, so as the moderator, I got the privilege of the last question here. We're down to our final 2 minutes. Give us a sense of what you think is going to happen in the next 5 or 10 years. I know you were before kind of saying marketing is becoming more strategic, but still not quite as strategic as it could be. But where does this go in the next 5 or 10 years?
Well, we're obviously a biased group, right? So it's marketing is going to rule the world. But I would say, in all seriousness, that the more traditional parts of the university are coming to the extension school and understanding the marketing resources and enrollment resources and student services resources that we have as they think about their traditional programs and how those are going to need to evolve. And so we definitely, much more so even than 2 years ago, are finding people people who, 10 years ago just would have had complete disdain
Why
for
is
what we
marketing in
do.
this meeting
Yes,
at all? Right.
And they might not know exactly what marketing does, but they want to know a little bit more. So.
I would say something we're piloting now, but I do think it's something that could be probably on the 5-10 year horizon is a lot more artificial intelligence. I think what we've seen is consumers' behavior, and what they have shown us is they want things on their terms. They want it to feel extremely personalized. And as marketers, we have to do everything we can to deliver as personalized experience as possible. And I do believe that the technology is out there, that it will enable us as marketers to try to figure out how to do that more effectively. So it really will almost be like a person is moving into an experience, and it will be very personalized for them, no matter where they are in that journey. So.
I totally 100% agree. I think that if you don't think of your institution and your products, and you don't consider yourself at least partly a technology company, your competitor does, and they're going to take your students. And so I think, what does that look like for learning in the future? And personalization is huge. As we see millennials and Generation Z becoming our adult learners, their expectations are going to be very different than what we currently have.
I think the academic credential is going to start to be looked at differently by employers. I don't see this as something that's going to happen tomorrow. It might not happen before I retire, but I think it will happen. I think we have to be prepared for that. I think we have to start thinking as a traditional institution as to how we're going to provide individuals with credit for life experience, work experience, military experience, not to the point of creating a lower quality or an easier degree, but something that becomes a little bit more stackable and a little bit more obtainable for audiences that maybe are outside of our traditional student population.
That's a perfect way to end it. Please join me in giving a round of applause for our panel.